After 215 years in Egypt, the Israelites leave Egypt. The Israelites came out of Egypt in divisions. Each tribe had its place in column. Scouts went out ahead to look for sources of water and places to camp. They probably had a forward guard of warriors, a main body composed of men, women, children, and animals. This in turn was followed by a rear guard. The following are three scenarios of the Red Sea crossing, in descending probability order. The Israelites set out from Ramses on the 15th day of the first month of the year, the day after Passover. Their first camp was at Succoth. They left Succoth and camped at Etham at the edge of the desert. They left Etham, turned back at Pi-Hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon, and camped near Migdol at the Red Sea. All that night the Lord drove back the sea with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. There is a natural phenomenon that could explain this. It is called wind set down. In 1882, Major General Tulloch of the British Army observed that Lake Tanis had its bottom revealed west of Port Said, Egypt. The lake had its waters blown to the west by a strong east wind over the course of a night. In the time of Moses, Lake Tanis may not have existed and may have been open sea. The Bala Lake did exist and would have been much larger and deeper than it is today. And the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on the right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots followed them into the sea. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. Again, starting at Ramses. Their first camp was at Succoth. They left Succoth and camped at Etham at the edge of the desert. They left Etham, turned back at Pi-Hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon, and camped near Migdol at the Red Sea. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. Again, starting at Ramses. They camped at Succoth. They left Succoth and camped at Etham at the edge of the desert. They left Etham, turned back at Pi-Hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon, and camped near Migdol at the Red Sea. After crossing the Red Sea, it is quite a distance to go to get to the way of the Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water at Marah because it was bitter. Springs in the Sinai vary in bitterness year to year along with the water flow. It was found by the British during the Great War that people and animals can get used to the bitterness. They left Marah and went to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees. Then they camped there. Elim may be the Egyptian town of Nekel. What palm trees existed in Moses' time were replaced by several hundred Mediterranean fruit trees. Nakhel was a vital stop for Muslim pilgrims traveling to Mecca on Hajj. It is halfway between Suez and Aqaba on the Wilderness Road. Springs became wells. Wells were fitted with shadoufs to make drawing well water easier. Some shadoufs, which were a crane-like well tool used in irrigation since around 2000 BC, can still be found. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. They left Elim and camped by the Red Sea. That evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared. Now a wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea. The significance of the quail event will be looked at in more detail later in this video. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it could be consumed, the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them down with a severe plague. Therefore the place was named Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people who had craved other food. The spring of Nephirim may be the camp of Kibroth Hattaavah. Any place along the stream flowing from it may be the camp of Kibroth Hattaavah. They left the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dabka. The inlet at Ad Dura on the Jordanian border may be the light blue inlet that Dabka was named for. They left Dabka and camped at El Ush. They left El Ush and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim.
Está echadita. Oiga, señor, we are federales. You know, the mountain police.
If you're the police, where are your badges?
Badges? We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.
Better not come any closer.
No sea tonto, hombre.
And Joshua overcame the Amalekites with sword. They left Rephidim and camped in the desert of Sinai. After they, the Israelites, set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. How fast did Moses and the Israelites travel? Deuteronomy 1:2. It is an 11-day journey from Horeb by way of the Mount Seir road to Kadesh Barnea. Using the distance 2 tool, we find that it is 161 miles between Elbad and Wadi Musa. That is an average of 14.6 miles per day. The key to finding the actual route may be the common quail. A study of the biometrics of the migratory common quail at Eilat, Israel. The common quail crosses the Mediterranean Sea in the autumn in large numbers, and several hundred thousands are netted annually. Eilat, Israel is located at the northern edge of the combined Sable, Sahara, and Sinai deserts. During spring migration, the quail reach this region after a long and arduous journey. Many spring migrants returning from their wintering grounds in Africa to the Palearctic breeding grounds are unable to store enough energy to complete the migration without refueling at Eilat. Israel in general, and Eilat in particular, are at the eastern extremes of the known quail migration routes in the spring. The data was collected in the spring as the quail made their way to their breeding grounds. The quail also engage in a loop migration strategy, whereby the species crosses across the Mediterranean Sea in the autumn in a broad front, but returns via the Rift Valley land bridge, resulting in a greater number staging at Eilat. In this map, you can see there are three main quail flyways: Western Europe to Western Africa, Central Africa to Central Europe, then from Eastern Europe to East and Central Africa. This flyway goes through the Nile Valley and the Jordan Rift Valley. The orange area on the map represent the summer and spring breeding area. The green area on the map represent the winter feeding area, where the quail stay during the cold northern winters. The Eilat Quail Study tagged a number of spring migrating quail. Listed are 5 reported places where they were captured. Presumably, the quail had wintered in Central and Eastern Africa. Where does this study take place? At Eilat, Israel, about 6 miles from Taba Beach, or as Moses named it, Taberah. Roman Hebrew historian Josephus writes that the quail is more plentiful in the Arabian Gulf than anywhere else. I had to look into the chronological order of the quail event or events. Exodus 16 concerns itself with the quail arriving at the confluence of the Red Sea and the Desert of Sin. Numbers 11 seems to be placed at a time a year later and maybe in a different place. Yet the stories are almost the same. Then there is Moses asking, "Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat to eat.'" If that was a year after the first quail event, why didn't Moses remember this? He supposedly wrote the book. Has he lost his memory? All his books would be in doubt of any accuracy. No, undoubtedly both Numbers 11 and Exodus 16 concerns the same quail event. Then there is additional proof. Psalms 105 shows the quail event going before the splitting of the rock. Psalms 106 shows the quail event going before making the golden calf at Horeb. Psalms 78 shows that the manna and quail came before the covenant, thus proving there was one and only one quail event, and it was at Taberah. Coturnism is an illness featuring muscle tenderness and muscle cell breakdown after consuming quail, or the common quail, from which the name derives, and that have fed on poisonous plants. The plants that are suspected of causing this are hemlock and hellebore seeds, though a more recent idea is that the quail's muscles can become toxic just from overuse, and no toxic seed consumption is needed. The earliest surviving Old Testament is actually a Greek translation of the Hebrew text called the Septuagint. The first 5 books were translated in 280 BC, with the remaining completed in 250 BC, and is often called the Septuagint LXX. The original Torah was changed around the 1st century, when the vowel marks and some other changes were made. The earliest surviving complete Tanakh is from the 10th century AD. The earliest name used for the desert west of Kadesh was Sin, not Zin. All these references to the desert of Sin are in the Septuagint. They are circled here in red. In the Tanakh, most of these deserts are referred to as Zin. Only one is referred to as Sin. These are circled in green. In my map, the desert of Zin and the desert of Sin probably should be amalgamated into one. In my map, the desert of Sin probably should extend from the south end of the Dead Sea to the north end of the Red Sea, and to the west halfway to Elim.